What did Jesus write in the dirt of the temple floor in the story of the woman taken in adultery? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the answer is a very simple one. Nothing. Because this didn't happen. This is a literary creation. There is no historical event behind what is in the text. All that matters is what is in the text. And so there is nothing that was written in the dirt of the temple floor. But I want to suggest that there is symbolism just in the notion of Jesus writing in the dirt of the temple floor, because we've got a story of a woman who is caught in the act of adultery and is taken to the temple to see if Jesus, who is God's avatar or representative on earth, will condemn her to death. And the closest conceptual analog that we have to this anywhere in the scriptures is in Numbers 5, what is known as the sotah, or the ordeal of bitter waters. And the idea here is that if a man suspects his wife is guilty of adultery but has no evidence, he takes her to the temple, presents her before the priest with an offering, and he writes a curse out, and then takes a jug of water, takes some dirt from the temple floor, tosses it in the water, scrapes the ink of the curse off into the water, and then the woman pronounces a blessing or a curse on her, depending on her guilt or innocence, and drinks the water. And then if she is innocent, she will conceive. She will be blessed with fertility. If she is guilty, she will be cursed with infertility, and that is represented by these grotesque disformations of her genitals, which is imagery that is associated with infertility in ancient West Asia. And so I would suggest that one way to think about this story, it may not have been what the author was intending, but we have many of the elements of the sotah, and so Jesus is being presented with a case of a woman not suspected of adultery, but caught in the actual act. And so we have the writing, we have the dust of the temple floor, and what happens after Jesus says, "Those of you who are without sin cast the first stone," says, "Neither do I condemn you, and go and sin no more." In other words, when given an even more clear case of adultery, Jesus refuses to condemn the woman, which I suggest might be an overturning of the expectations of the sotah. Now, the temple didn't exist anymore when this story was written, so there wouldn't have been any possibility for the sotah to be performed, but it may be a subtle dig at the ritual of the sotah and maybe suggesting, hey, don't condemn women to death for this. That's not how we do things anymore. So just one way to think about that, but ultimately what I wanted to point out is that when we presuppose historicity behind these stories and we try to track down details of the events that exist behind the text, we first got to make sure that there are events behind the text. In this case, there are not. This is a literary creation. It was not even in the earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of John, and when it first pops up, it is in different parts of the Gospel of John. It's even in the Gospel of Luke in one manuscript, and then later on it settles in the place where we find it now. There are no data that support the historicity of these events, so there was nothing that was being written in the dirt. But even if there were historicity to this story, what we are interpreting is some author's representation of it, and they represent it in certain ways with certain rhetorical goals. And so, as I've said before, don't think historically, think literarily. Not literally, but literarily. Try to understand how these texts are functioning literarily, what the rhetorical goals of the authors were, and that will lead to asking better questions of the text, rather than asking questions of the text that cannot be answered, because the text might be literary creations to begin with. They might not be describing anything historical that actually took place. And the fit for this video still does not mean Romans go home.